It's funny. I said the other day that I think that one of the best things that has come out of COVID for education, besides the innovation to push education further and beyond the four walls of the school, but also that component of consistently including social emotional learning. Um, I think that we've gotten away from that because we've become so content. SEL is not, they're not going to test a kid on the SEL, but the SEL will determine whether or not that kid becomes a functional human. So it's like, how do you negate that in lieu of content when, I'm sorry, my daughter said it best. She said, Daddy, when I'm 40 years old, am I really going to need to know how to solve a quadratic equation? I say, not unless you're an engineer, an architect, or you're teaching mathematics. That's a reality. And so what we need to focus on and what schools are not, well, I say a lot more doing it now because of trying to combat the PTSD that will come out of this. Can't say might, that will come out of kids being isolated, of kids, one of my kids said the other day, Mr. I just want to hug everybody because I'm a hugger and I haven't hugged anybody besides my mom and dad in months. And I'm sitting there like, oh, I'm a hugger. And my teacher friends know that that's one of the things that I do. I love to hug, and to not have that and not be able to experience that exchange, that transfer of energy from one to another, that is huge. And if we don't teach kids how to navigate that or how to find alternatives, then, we're setting ourselves up to, if you think it's bad now, then just wait and see what happens when we get into 2022 2023, when these kids are older and they're now trying to navigate in a so-called normal manner post-COVID. We're scary.
I remember the moment. So Will came up to our wedding. He was our best man, and he came to my house right before we were going to rehearsal, and my wife was like, is Will gonna hug me? And I was like, yeah, he's going to hug you. But you have that moment in your mind where you're like, oh my God, I shouldn't be hugging people. I should not be hugging people. I shouldn't be hugging people. But you do. And thankfully for us, our wedding was not a super spreader. No one had COVID. No one got COVID. But for 2 weeks after my wedding, I had stress about, oh my God, like, my grandparents were there, my parents, my in-laws were there. It's just like, man, and you think about what our kids are gonna have that. Like, there are gonna be kids. I will say, with the vaccines coming out, I am hopeful that I'll be back in a classroom in the fall. I actually, for the first time, really have hope. But there are gonna be kids that when they come back in the fall are gonna have stress level 47.
Mm-hmm.
And just already starting to think about how do we start to combat that? How do we start to, like, and one thing Wilkie and I have been talking about as we've ended the year is, like, really trying to think big picture and start to ask, like, some bigger questions. And that's a question that I think is probably going to be a through line of the podcast this whole year, is how do we try to anticipate and mitigate those stresses that kids are going to have. And like Will, you said, it's not going to magically change when we go back. It just isn't.
Yeah, we have to restart over, making school a safe place.
Almost like teaching kindergarten again.
Mm-hmm.
With those parents dropping the kids off and the kids are just bawling because they're afraid of going into the classroom. It's going to happen, but it's going to be different kids at each level that's going to have that experience.
Just thinking about trying to have spots in my classroom where kids who don't want to sit next to anyone can sit. And, just teaching middle school, I'm thinking about myself, okay, now you have the kid who doesn't want to be touched, and everybody knows they don't want to be touched. So then they get hassled the whole day.